overall, of course, it's a tricky geopolitical environment that we navigate. But I see there's massive opportunity to also build solutions leveraging technology that addresses also the challenges at hand. India's generative AI startup ecosystem has grown what over four times in just 1 year. 25% of the patents that come out of SAP globally come out of this location. We have not probably made the headlines when it comes to foundational AI yet. If you look at countries like the United States, over 50% of VC funding is happening in AI. The question really is not will India ever build our own Anthropic? The question is how soon. The future will not just be about women participating in tech, it will be about women leading and shaping and also defining the direction of technology, which I think is super important.
We are in conversation today with one of India's leading women tech leaders and an AI pioneer. Sindhu Gangadharan is the managing director of SAP Labs India. SAP is Europe's biggest software company in terms of revenue, market cap, and global presence. Sindhu is also the chairperson of NASSCOM. We are talking to her at a time when AI and geopolitics are constantly colliding with each other to reshape technology, talent, and trade. In other words, she has her work absolutely cut out for her. In this conversation, we talk to Sindhu about her journey, about her pivotal decisions, about how technology and tech companies feature in this really fast-changing and volatile world. We talk about how SAP Labs India is building enterprise AI for the world. We talk about the future of work. And of course, we talk about where India features in the global tech map. Sindhu, very warm welcome to this latest episode of Corner Office Conversation.
Thank you so much, Anirban. It's great to be in conversation with both you, Anirban, as well as with Bina. And I think it's a great topic and looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. The pleasure is absolutely ours, Sindhu. So, from a software developer to product management to finally being the first woman to lead SAP Labs India, how has the journey been? What would you call your two or three really important decisions that brought you here?
Well, yeah, indeed. I mean, I started off my journey at SAP here at SAP Labs India, Anirban. This was back in the late 90s as a young developer, and very quickly I had the opportunity to move to the headquarters, and there again had the opportunity to work across our portfolio, across mainly in technology, mainly on the platform side of our business, and it was. Summer of 2019 when I got the opportunity to be back home. Let's put it that way, here at Labs India, and already, I mean, SAP in India had seen considerable growth, not just in terms of numbers, but in terms of the portfolio coverage, and it was great to be back. And also take ownership of the portfolio that we have here out of the location, and it's also at a time when phenomenal change is happening also in the country today. What India is our largest R&D hub outside of our headquarters. It is also one of our fastest growing market regions for SAP, which makes it a very exciting combination to kind of lead the way forward together with our customers. And then now in this combination of heading up the R&D for SAP here in India, but also heading up customer innovation services, get the opportunity to work with our customers on the latest and greatest, shape their transformation journey with our innovations. It's been super exciting, and yeah, couldn't have asked for anything better.
Right. Let's come straight to AI. And you have been somewhat of an AI pioneer in SAP Labs. If I'm not mistaken, this is basic my homework, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think way back in 2023, due to this, as a result of this massive reskilling process, 60% of SAP Labs India was engaged in AI projects. Would you call it an early pivot, first of all? And what, led you to make that decision?
Yeah, I mean, when I think back to 2022, 2023, I think it's very clear, right, Anirban, that the signs were already there that AI wasn't just another shiny tech trend, right? It was very clear, and especially for us, right? We are building. I mean, what if I just look at the numbers? 87% of the world's business transactions touches an SAP system. So, and so it was very clear for us that also AI will be the foundation of enterprise innovation, right? And at SAP, we've always believed in the fact that you have to be prepared ahead of the curve, not after something happens. So for us at SAP Labs in India, the big question was how do we make sure that our people are also future ready, right? And honestly, that was a non-negotiable aspect for us. Um, and that also led us to these two big moves, if you may will. The one was how do we look at reskilling at scale? And
Mhm.
yes, at the end of 2023, nearly half of our colleagues who worked on core R&D were already AI enabled. And now, if I fast forward to today, Anirban, I mean, we like I mentioned, we are 17,000 strong here in India, and close to 70% of our workforce has already gone through AI upskilling, right? And what excites me even more is over 80% of our developers are actively using AI tools in their daily work. Today, if you take SAP Joule, which is our AI copilot, right? It already has what over 1,600 skills built into it, and many of those are built right here from India, right here from Bangalore, right? And that tells me our pivot wasn't just about making sure that our people are skilled; it was also about reshaping their mindsets because it's also about helping our teams see themselves not just as AI adopters, but as innovators who are shaping the next generation of enterprise technology.
Right, taking it up from there, Sindhu, you've been working out of India uh, for last at least more than 5 years, and SAP's main AI development hub is now in India. You just opened the second largest campus as well. If you could just tell us, you touched upon the enterprise AI space. What makes India the place to build enterprise AI for the world? What is it that you're working on?
Yeah, sure, Bina. When people ask me this question of why India is the right at the heart of SAP's global strategy, right? The answer is simple. I think the answer is um, it's always this three things that come together here in India. One is the talent. The second is opportunity. I talked earlier as well about the fastest growing market. The consumers are here, and the scale, right? And it's really about all of this talent, opportunity, and scale coming together. And today, for us, there's a massive opportunity here. The industries that we are working with right here in India, right? I mean, you have manufacturing industries, you have retail. In fact, here in our new campus, we have outside of our headquarters the only autonomous retail store, the S Market, which we launched, right? So the future of retail powered by AI happening right here, or healthcare, financial services. And some of the use cases, what we work with our customers right here in terms of the opportunity that exists here, they're amongst the most dynamic and also important, most complex as well, many times. So the problems that we solve here are often can be scaled out. They're much diverse in terms of consumption, and we truly believe if it works here, then we can also scale it out elsewhere. Um, what I'm trying to say, Bina, is when we design AI solutions in India, they're not just staying here, right? They're rolled out also globally. And we have seen that again and again with also co innovation work that's happening right here from India for the world.
And just to extend that a bit, how do you see AI evolving within India to be, a tech hub beyond services? Because we've been, kind of boasting about Indian tech services, but we are
Mhm.
also kind of building more products and focusing on products, and SAP has been a pioneer in that. So, could you tell us how do you see AI really evolving for India as a tech service?
Yeah, I think so. If I just maybe put first the SAP hat on, right? Like I mentioned earlier, Bina, for us, our location and this location is not just the largest R&D hub outside of our headquarters. It's actually the place where many of the big AI breakthroughs are happening. And what makes India very special is the phenomenal ecosystem that we are part of. I think if I put on my NASCOM hat, right? I mean, we had this report showing how India's generative AI startup ecosystem has grown what over 4 times in just 1 year, right, Bina? And which makes it also India such a dynamic AI hub in the world, right? And that same report also talked about how AI and data are contributing to what $500 billion of India's GDP, right? And that's significant. And I think the momentum is also pretty infectious in the country, right? And that is also why India continues to remain at the center of several enterprises AI strategy, definitely for us at SAP. Um, and I think it's really about all of that coming together in this context. And if I just also look at the phenomenal ecosystem that we have here, right? It's one is
Hmm.
startups, one is also our partners are here. So the some of the largest GSSPs are here serving the world's businesses from here. So when you look at that triangle of bringing together corporates like us, our customers, our partners, the startups, I think it becomes a very infectious, energetic, product driven thinking that we are seeing and experiencing as we speak.
Just two contrarian questions, Sindhu. How do you respond to critique that despite the huge pool of AI talent in India, not enough AI entrepreneurship is happening here, in the sense that we are very far away from building an Anthropic or a Perplexity or a Palantir? First of all, are
Mm.
there still challenges that come in the way of building these such companies that are at the forefront of the AI story?
Yeah, I think I would maybe flip that question a little bit
Sure.
as well, Anirban, because India's strength has always been its scale, right? I mean, we have not probably made the headlines when it comes to foundational AI yet, but AI being built here is already impacting millions of lives, like the examples that I just gave you, right? I mean, it's happening every single day. However, I get your point, and I absolutely believe that India has the potential to also create our own Anthropic or OpenAI or Perplexity for that matter. And I think in order to make that leap, we also need to double down on few things, right? First of all, I think infrastructure, and definitely here India has made a lot of progress with initiatives like if I look at the national AI mission. But we also need to have that hyperscale investments, right, in both private and public compute facilities, if we want also our researchers from to kind of work on that, startups to play in some of these big leagues, right? That's needed. I think also the second thing is capital, right? Because if you just look at deep tech research, it's also about being there for an extended period of time, because you're not talking about yields in like few months or in a year. It We need to be patient, right? We need to have kind of this tolerant funding, if you may will, right? And I mean, if you look at countries like the United States, over 50% of VC funding is happening in AI, right? And mainly that went into also the foundational model startups. In India, that number was just a fraction of that, right? And that is a gap that we also need to address. The other aspect is also data, right? I mean, of course, data is there, and
But
our
it's very
diverse
fragmented
skills.
right now in India. Would you agree?
Exactly. And it's fragmented. And here also, if you imagine foundational models trained natively on also Indian languages, right? And or if you look at healthcare data or agricultural data, there's a lot of opportunity for us, right? And that is also something which we need to kind of have, not just this data in a way, but also these small data sets, right? Not just the large data sets, but also small data sets trained for those domains. And finally, it's also about collaboration. And this is, I think, also where we do that to a great extent. I mean, we have that collaboration between the government, academia, and the industry. But I think it needs to be amped up to even the next greater levels, if you may will, right? So The question really is not will India ever build our own Anthropic. The question is how soon, right? Because I think the ambition is there, the talent is there, the energy is absolutely there, and we have also the right ecosystem. If you bring in the infrastructure, the capital, the data aspect, and the collaboration, I clearly have absolutely no doubt that we will see a lot more in this space. No.
Right. And the second one is, how do you react to opinions? And we recently heard Vinod Khosla on a podcast saying this also, that this is just like the dot com bubble, this is another bubble. And there are two ways in which this is playing out. One, the big tech companies are spending generational wealth in poaching, researchers, engineers from other companies. And on the other hand, of
Mhm.
course, we have companies announcing layoffs, etc. Uh, how do you react to this thought that this is another bubble?
Yeah, I totally get why people try to draw these parallels between this AI surge and other booms that happened in the past. Um, I mean, on the high level, maybe it feels the same, but if you kind of go beyond the headlines, right, you see it's very very different, right? If you just look at also the pace of adoption, Anirban, just take ChatGPT when it started off, right? I mean, it reached 1 million users, what, in just literally 3 to 5 days, right? Or people are familiar with the to like applications like Instagram. I mean, to reach those kind of numbers, what even Instagram, which is kind of very popular amongst everybody, took 2 years to hit that mark, right? And so that's the kind of scale that we are talking about. And today, Chat GPT handles over 1 billion queries every single day, right? And with hundreds of millions of weekly active users on the platform. And so this level of real world utility of across beat enterprise businesses, businesses of all sizes, developers, consumers, I think that scale is clearly unprecedented, right? And if I again put on the enterprise hat, I mean, the evidence is very, very compelling, right? If you just look at the data, already today, 58% of organizations have already embedded at least one AI capability in their business or in their products, right? And so, and that number is only increasing as we speak. Um, and if you look at the scale at which it's adopted, generative AI itself could contribute, according to some of the reports that were recently going out from McKinsey, right? What it was close to 2.6 to 4.6 into the global economy, $1 trillion, right? I mean, into the economy, and I think for India as well, the impact is very very tangible. If I just look at the NASCOM report where we talked about AI adoption, we clearly said that we project AI adoption could add up to $500 billion to India's GDP by end of this year, right? So again, the data speaks for itself. So it's clearly for me, and just from the data and mapping it to what's happening and where we are also leading the way forward, this is clearly not a hype. It's a foundational transformation, and one that is clearly redefining how businesses and also societies are operating and will operate for in the decades to come. No?
Sindhu, if I could, come in here, you mentioned responsible AI, and given the global competitiveness and sovereign-focused competitiveness right now that's going on, how should India balance the need for AI guardrails with the need to innovate faster?
Yeah, Bina, this is indeed one of the trickiest questions globally. How do we make sure that, and that goes back to my point, when we talk about scale, we have to still have the clarity when it comes to also responsible usage of AI. So how do we keep AI safe without slowing it down, right? That balance. And I think here, Bina, India also has a very unique opportunity to set that benchmark by adopting a more a principles based and a risk tiered approach, right? That means focusing on some universal values, like I mentioned, fairness, transparency, the human in the loop, like always kind of explaining how did you get to that, right? And privacy as well for AI, but at the same time also applying some stringent guardrails only where risks are highest. For example, in areas like healthcare, I think that's a non-negotiable, or financial systems, or when we are talking about areas like law enforcement, right? There are areas which are super critical and super stringent when it comes to that high risk areas. But whereas for low risk applications, we should keep that runway clear when we talk about speed of innovation. And here again, I truly believe that these regulatory sandboxes are also a great tool for us, because that allows also innovation to be much more quicker, startups to test in this controlled environment, while at the same time regulators can look at real world insights to shape also policies that need to be put into place, right? And not to forget the role of the industries. I mean, we if I just look at SAP, we've always believed in this three R's when we talk about AI, right? One, and the three R's stands for the relevance, the reliability, and the third R, very important, what we're talking about is responsibility, because these are also where we can bring in that thought process into the policymakers, partners, and customers, that responsible AI is not an afterthought, but it's a guiding principle of how you build solutions.
Speaking of opportunities, Sindhu, GCC ecosystem which has been built in India is also kind of catering to that, and we've seen immense talent being poached, if I may say so, by the GCC ecosystem. And India is already kind of making a mark in terms of being the GCC capital of the world. If you
Mhm.
could just tell us, is the recent growth that we've seen, because we've seen previous waves as well, is this growth sustainable? And how do you see GCCs evolving over the next 5 to 10 years, given that you're one of the largest one in India?
Yeah, I mean, Bina, India's GCC growth is honestly, I think, one of the most powerful examples of how our technology landscape has transformed, right? And
Hmm.
if you um, kind of look back even a decade back, most GCCs were, I mean, on that maturity curve, were still kind of support hubs. Today, however, they are at the front line of innovation, right? I just gave you so many examples, building products, creating that IP. I mean, to my earlier point, for us, it's not just about our numbers here in India, but 25% of the patents that come out of SAP globally come out of this location, right? Or beat about how are we shaping the future of global enterprises. And to your question on, is this um, growth sustainable, I'd say absolutely yes, right? Because it's
Hmm.
been always anchored into these three core strengths. First, um, what we also talked about earlier, right? The sheer depth of the talent. The second thing is also the tech ecosystem around us, which has also really matured in the last decade. And third, I, it's also the growing confidence of global companies to expand their innovation mandates in India. Today, the GCCs in India are leading advanced areas, right? Be it AI, be it cybersecurity, semiconductors as well, and even quantum for that matter, right? And they're just not supporting their global enterprises, they're making India pivotal to that future of deep tech. So I clearly see that over the next years, we will evolve the GCCs of India into this AI first innovation hubs, and who are taking that ownership of that end to end product engineering, the R&D work that's happening, the transformation projects that we are driving for our customers. Almost, I believe that they will transform into these product led startups, right, within large enterprises, who are much more agile, more entrepreneurial, more laser focused on solving business critical problems, but also important for India, generating IP at scale.
Right. And speaking of this, while India is coveted, the talent is attractive, there are also globally, we are seeing a lot of trade wars going on. There are tariff frictions. And the latest being, that this could affect our outsourcing industry as well. How vulnerable do you think is India at this point in time in terms of their software operations, their service global clients? And, given the pace at which GCCs are growing as well, which are multinationals largely from the US. How do you see this being impacted, on Indian sector? And has SAP also seen some impact in terms of the slower decision making? What are your client conversations telling you?
No, in fact, I mean, clients, I mean, overall, of course, it's a tricky geopolitical environment that we navigate. But I see there's massive opportunity to also build solutions leveraging technology that addresses also the challenges at hand, right? Because today, think about being a solution that tells you, gives you the full visibility. Now, given all the different tariffs that are applicable in different parts of the world, solutions which give you that visibility, investment decision making at your fingertips to say, okay, which suppliers do I pick, do what would be the ideal situation for my problem at hand. So I see this as a massive opportunity to build solutions that address exactly this aspect of very complex geopolitical changes that is happening and changing every single day, right? And I see this as an opportunity. And also for India, I think we have to stay absolutely focused on our strengths, right? And I think that is where our differentiator will be. And if you really have that strong hinge on how do you look at problem solving, how do I look at leveraging the ecosystem, how do you look at collaborations and co-creations and bringing the ecosystem together, I think we will be able to navigate this how we have navigated a lot of it.
Hmm.
But I see this as a massive opportunity to also build solutions that address the problem at hand.
Right. In the near term, do you see any adverse effect of what's going on, and what if there is a potential risk of tariff being imposed on this sector?
Yeah, I think we have been absolutely agile in terms of being able to navigate a lot of these changes that have come our way, and I'm sure we will be able to navigate this as well. But I think if you just look at the world's largest enterprises rely on India to kind of help them run at their best, right? But at the same time, that doesn't mean that we just rest on our laurels. Like repeated, right, like I said before, right, it's also important that we make sure that we build our strengths in terms of how do we deepen that understanding what our talent has, the skill building, that close collaboration between the government, the industry, as well as the academia, to make sure no matter what the change happens around us, that we're able to navigate accordingly. And I think this has also been our biggest strength as India, to be able to be agile and dynamic in the way we adapt to certain situations. And I don't see that. And of course, um, in the end, businesses have to run successfully, right? No matter what. And they will
Hmm.
rely on the best in class talent and expertise to help them run their businesses at their best. So, which
Right.
means if we stay focused, we will be able to navigate those winds of change.
Right. One last question from my side. You spoke about cultural and mindset shifts. Do you think there are enough women leading the tech industry? Is it changing now? And if not, why not? And what needs to change?
Yeah, I mean, if I just reflect back, Anirban, when I started off my journey in tech, there were not many tech role models that you could look up to and emulate. And but that has changed, right? I mean, I'm sure you'd agree we're in this conversation together. So the landscape has definitely changed. And the good news, Anirban, is also that the pipeline is healthier than ever before, right? I mean, today, if you just also look at the numbers, women now make up 35% of the STEM students, right? And particularly in India, that number is even higher. 43% of STEM graduates are women, which is the highest in the world, right? But we also know the challenges when women enter the workforce. How do we make sure that we don't have any kind of a leakage in that wonderful and healthy pipeline that we have? And just to also take one example, I remember few years back when we looked at our own data as SAP, right? And as I remember this conversation when we were looking at this trend that we saw of young mothers leaving the workforce because they didn't have the right support systems. And back then, that was also the time when we looked at the data and we said, okay, let's launch Saplings, which is our in house childcare facility.
Right.
It might sound like a very simple step, but the impact that it has had is very profound, right? Because suddenly young parents and talented women, since we're talking about women, could continue their careers without having to choose between, hey, do I take care of my little one or go to work? Because you have right in on the campus, on both our campuses across or all over India, right? And but these are small things but make a big impact, right? And one program alone cannot solve that systemic issue. I think also we need to think about much more structured mentorship, much more sponsorship programs, targeted leadership development tracks, and also combined with, I think, supportive policies like flexible working models, extended parental leaves. I can go on and on, right? But I think this collectively, if we are all kind of focused on all these aspects, I'm genuinely optimistic about the momentum that we are seeing, right? And the future will not just be about women participating in tech, it will be about women leading and shaping and also defining the direction of technology, which I think is super important.
In short, here's to more Sindhu Gangadharans in the Indian tech industry. Thank you so much for joining us on Corner Office Conversation.
Thank
Thanks so
you.
much. Thank you so much. It's been a great conversation today. Thank you.